What's up, my comic comrades? One of the most underrated monster villains in all of comics is Solomon Grundy, but it's also Villains Month here on Variant, so today we're showing him some love. Plus, he's a zombie from Slaughter Swamp, and we're only 2 weeks away from Halloween. You can't have a better fit than that. Anyway, most of us know that Solomon Grundy is a Batman villain, with Slaughter Swamp being just a few miles outside of Gotham. However, that's not how Grundy started out, nor was Batman the first hero he ever faced. So let's dive in and learn the history of Solomon Grundy, born on a Monday. Solomon Grundy first appeared in All-American Comics issue 61 in October of 1944. He was created by Alfred Bester and Paul Raymond. As for Grundy's comic book origin, it's all broken down to us in All-American Comics 61 and later expanded upon in Shadow of the Bat 39. In All-American Comics 61, we see that the first hero Grundy would ever face is Alan Scott Green Lantern. And on the very first panel of the issue, they give us a rendition of his iconic nursery rhyme. It's right after this we see two criminals who apparently have escaped prison running, as narration says, it is late Monday night and a heavy fog settles over the quicksands of Slaughter Swamp. One of the convicts say, "We will be safe here. Everybody's afraid of Slaughter Swamp because of Cyrus Gold. He was murdered here 50 years ago." The other convict says, "But they think his ghost walks. Imagine being afraid of a ghost." But as both of them are saying they don't believe in ghosts, one of them says, "Look, something's coming out of the quicksand," which of course is Solomon Grundy. As he walks towards them, they're both terrified, with them saying, "Don't come near me." They then start shooting him, but realize the bullets aren't stopping him. Now, we can only assume that Solomon Grundy killed both criminals, because the next time we see him the following Tuesday, he's wearing one of their prison outfits coming up to a new group of criminals who are by a campfire in the swamp. They then look at Grundy and make fun of him, saying, "Where did that mug come from? Awful, ain't he?" Which is fair considering he's a reanimated corpse that just crawled out of the swamp. In any case, one of them asks, "Pal, what's your name?" Grundy replies, "I have no name. I was born on Monday." The man replies, "Born on Monday? Like the nursery rhyme Solomon Grundy?" Grundy replies, "Yes, that is a good name. Solomon Grundy. It will be my name." Another one of the criminals says, "Okay, Solomon Grundy, but get this. I'm boss here. Understand?" As he puts his hands on Grundy's arm, Grundy smacks him, sending him flying back while saying, "Do not touch me. I do not like to be touched." They then realize Grundy is now standing in the fire and it doesn't bother him. Realizing this dude is pretty strong and basically indestructible, they say, "Grundy, you're gonna be our new boss. With you leading us, we ain't gonna be down and out no more." So they head back to Gotham and put him in a black suit. And once they get back to Gotham, they use Grundy to rob all sorts of places, because even the police firing their Uzis at him can't stop Grundy. So much so, Alan Scott Green Lantern has to intervene. The crazy part is Green Lantern's ring had no effect on Solomon Grundy, which confused the hell out of Alan Scott. But after 11 brutal murders, Green Lantern had to figure out a way to put Grundy down, and that was by using brute force with his bare hands, eventually tossing Grundy in front of a moving train. But on the very last page of the story, Green Lantern starts talking about the ring Solomon Grundy was wearing that had Cyrus Gold's name on it. Lantern says, "That's what bothered me, Cyrus Gold's ring. That's the incredible explanation of Grundy. Cyrus Gold wore that ring when he was murdered 50 years ago, and Solomon Grundy wore it too, until he dropped it in the sports store. Cyrus Gold's skeleton then laid in the swamp for 50 years, and an incredible biological miracle took place. On his bones, a pseudo-life was built. Bits of rotten wood and leaves built themselves into the monster that is Solomon Grundy. That's why he's immune to the power ring. He was not real. He was a distortion of nature." But who was Cyrus Gold, the man who would eventually turn into Solomon Grundy? Well, this origin is later expanded upon in Batman Shadow of the Bat 39. On the first 2 pages of the issue, we find out exactly who Gold was, and let's just say he wasn't a nice man. You see, at the beginning of the issue, we see a man meeting up with a pregnant woman at Slaughter Swamp in 1985. He then asks, "Rachel, are you there?" He then sees her saying, "Thank God, this place offends my every sensibility." She tells him it's best if our business is kept far from prying eyes. "Did you bring the money?" He then pulls out money from his coat, saying, "What proof is there I am not being cheated?" She tells him, "6 months ago, you bought me for your pleasure, Cyrus Gold. Would you rather face the scandal if your wife were to find out?" He then tells her, "This is blackmail. This is not my child at all. I'm not going to give you a single cent," as he puts his money away. And as he does that, a man comes out from behind and strikes Cyrus on the back of the head, knocking him out. Rachel then says, "You hit him too hard, Jem. He's dead." The man replies, "Who cares? We have $100. The swamp can have Cyrus Gold," as he kicks his body into the swamp. So Cyrus was right. This was a scam, and it seems like Jem is the true father of Rachel's child, and they were just looking to get some moolah from Cyrus. But when Cyrus is kicked into the swamp, we see he's not dead. Before he completely submerges, he says, "Murderers, a curse on you. I swear to God, somehow I will be revenged," as he sinks to the bottom of the swamp. So this gives us the origin of Cyrus Gold. He was a crooked banker who was gonna get blackmailed but refused, so instead of paying with cash, he paid with his life. He then swore revenge, at which point the mystical properties of Slaughter Swamp turned him into Solomon Grundy over time. Midway through the issue, issue, page 15 to be exact, we get a recap of the first emergence of Solomon Grundy, which we saw in All-American Comics 61, where he meets the two convicts. It was a very nice callback. It came full circle. But there you have it, friends, the origin of Solomon Grundy and the man who became him. Now let's move on to story arcs and publication history. Alright, the first story I want to talk about is Solomon Grundy, Born on a Monday, from the 2009 7-issue solo series written by Scott Collins. This series mainly gives us a detailed look at Solomon Grundy's updated origin, showcasing Solomon Grundy's endless cycle of death and rebirth. However, the reason we didn't choose to go with this origin in detail for the origin part of the episode is because we still feel his original origin is more of a staple to the character. However, that doesn't take anything away from this series. Scott Collins does a fantastic job showing Grundy's quest to end his curse while simultaneously giving us a bigger understanding of Cyrus and Grundy's tragic backstory. It's actually a very creepy story, one you should definitely read during the Halloween season. In the story, we get to see Grundy go up against Alan Scott Green Lantern once again in the very first issue, just like in Grundy's first appearance. But we also see him fight one of my favorite and underrated DC characters, Etrigan. As the story progresses, we even see Grundy face Bizarro, Poison Ivy, Amazo, Frankenstein, and more. Almost every single issue is Grundy versus a different DC character, and it's pretty great. But like I mentioned a minute ago, more importantly, this dives into the backstory and psyche of Solomon Grundy. We see how Cyrus is affected by becoming Solomon Grundy. If you're a Solomon Grundy fan or just want to know more about the character, this would probably be my #1 recommendation to check out. Moving along, we have the 1994 Starman solo series, which Grundy appears in throughout, like in issues 32 through 34. The Starman series does a fantastic job humanizing Solomon Grundy, as most of the time he's just a monstrous corpse looking to destroy stuff, but in this series, he becomes an ally and friend of Jack Knight, aka Starman. And because he befriends Starman over the course of his appearances in the series, we see Grundy kind of go back and forth between hero and villain, trying to figure out who he is. You see just how sad Grundy is, as this curse is clearly not something that someone could deal with lightly. The series does a really good job at making you feel bad for Solomon Grundy, and that despite his appearance, he still has potential to be a good guy. They pulled a lot from Frankenstein's monster in this depiction of Solomon Grundy, as he has a childlike innocence, meaning he has potential to be good. Like all great stories for villains, the Starman series does a fantastic job giving us a gray area for Grundy and feeling bad for him. Then of course, we have Solomon Grundy's appearance in Batman The Long Halloween issue 2. In the issue, we see Batman chasing the Mink, aka Mickey Sullivan, into the Gotham sewers. But the sewers are apparently Solomon Grundy's domain. And when Batman runs into Grundy, he says, "I have no quarrel with you. I only came for the man who disturbed your privacy." But Grundy doesn't care and starts saying Solomon Grundy born on a Monday over and over while attacking Batman. But Batman eventually takes Grundy down by pulling spray out of his utility belt and spraying him. Grundy then slowly retreats back into the sewer. But Batman understood that none of this was Solomon Grundy's fault. Grundy wants to be alone and is isolating himself in the sewer. So Batman felt upset that he had to do this to Grundy, so later in the issue he brings Grundy a Thanksgiving meal on Thanksgiving, leaving it in the sewer for him. We then see Solomon Grundy pick up the turkey leg. It's a really small moment, but such a great Solomon Grundy moment yet again. You feel empathetic for the monster as he just wants to be left alone. And the fact that even Batman wanted him to have a good meal on Thanksgiving as he's alone and isn't hurting anybody really just made it a solid moment. I know this is about Solomon Grundy, but I just want to say real quick, people often forget how compassionate Batman can be. He does stuff like this all the time in the comics. Moving along, we have The Revenge of Solomon Grundy from Justice League of America 91 and 92 by Mike Frederick. It's a classic Solomon Grundy story, and like so many great Grundy stories, it shows the emotional turmoil that Grundy struggles with as he's more than just a rampaging Hulk Frankenstein-like brute. In the series, the JLA is forced to fight him after he's resurrected on Earth 2. It does a great job showing us how Grundy is a threat, but also a victim at the same time, as he didn't ask for this. It's a curse that he has to bear. But let me tell you something, one of the bigger takeaways for the story is Solomon Grundy manhandling Superman. Yeah, at the end of issue 91, he literally beats the crap out of Superman, tossing him around like a rag doll. And the beating continues in issue 92. Hear me, Solomon Grundy is soloing not only Superman, but the entire Justice League. It's kind of ridiculous. So if you ever say Grundy could take on Superman and someone looks at you weird, go tell them to look up Justice League 91 and 92. Because depending on the iteration of the character, Grundy is a real issue. There is even a panel in issue 92 of Grundy chucking Superman after Superman slaps him in the ears, with Grundy saying, "You hit Solomon Grundy. Solomon Grundy hit you harder." That is nuts. Now, with that said, there are so many other great Solomon Grundy story arcs like Crisis on Infinite Earths, the Swamp Thing team up in the Challenges of the Unknown 82 through 87, the Brightest Day storyline, the death of Solomon Grundy in Justice League of America 146 through 148, and more. But now let's move on to Solomon Grundy's powers and abilities. First and foremost, this dude is incredibly strong, and depending on who's riding him, he's strong enough to lift cars, bust through walls, or even fight the likes of Superman and Wonder Woman. I mean, we all saw this dude in the Arkham games. He was a massive brute and force to be reckoned with. And like I said earlier, he wrecked shop in JLA 91 and 92. Besides his incredible strength, which sometimes is portrayed as near limitless, he's also incredibly durable, being a reanimated corpse, which basically means he cannot be hurt. He cannot feel pain and is essentially everything proof. He can take massive amounts of gunfire, energy blasts, fire blasts, explosions, all of it, and it doesn't harm him. He's immune to extreme cold, extreme heat, pretty much everything. But if you're able to harm him, he also has an incredible healing factor. Again, a reanimated corpse zombie, if you will, that's able to heal himself. Whether he loses his limbs or his intestines fall out, it all heals over time. And depending on what version of the character we're talking about, he could even regrow limbs. Oh, and since he's a zombie, he's immortal. You can't permanently kill Grundy, because let's say you are able to kill him, he will just regrow or be reborn from the waters of Slaughter Swamp. Essentially, his resurrection is part of an endless cycle of death and rebirth. You can't get rid of him, so you can technically defeat him, but not permanently. As far as his intellect, it really depends yet again on what version or iteration of the character you're talking about. Sometimes he's portrayed much like Frankenstein's monster, being very childlike, not really able to communicate or comprehend many things. But in other versions, he's very capable, talking fluently, and strategic in his attacks. In fact, in the DC Rebirth era, Solomon Grundy was rebooted and tied into one of the elemental forces of nature, being part of the Rot, which is, as it sounds, the destructive force related to rot and decay. In this version, Grundy has control over the decay of nature, giving him supernatural abilities. And since Grundy is a being of the supernatural, the undead, he is immune to all disease and poison. All in all, Solomon Grundy is one of the most underrated villains in comic books, and I would love to see him as a villain for Rob Pattinson's Batman and see the two go toe-to-toe in the Batman franchise. But with that said, let's move on to reading recommendations. As for reading recommendations, check out All American Comics 61, Shadow of the Bat 39, The Revenge of Solomon Grundy in Justice League of America 91 through 92, the Solomon Grundy 2009 solo series, Batman the Long Halloween, and the Starman series from 1994. That should be enough to get you all started. But that wraps up our take on the history of Solomon Grundy. Let us know what you think of this zombified villain and if you think it's time for him to appear on the big screen in James Gunn's DCU. There is so much they could do with him, and I actually think James Gunn would do a fantastic job with the character. But we'll have to wait and see. Other than that, we'll see you next time when we talk about all things comics.